So if you've been around since the mid-2010s, you surely remember the time when Naruto ended and new series were coming around that were baptized as the new Naruto. Very similar story structure, very similar elements. A kid that society looks down upon with very little talent who wants to become the president of his country. And since new manga come around with very similar premise to Naruto, it was kinda weird that no series tried to pick up the successful story structure of One Piece and make a show around it. No series until Eden Zero. To begin with, let me just take some notes. In terms of talking about Eden Zero, I'm only going to talk about anime-wise. I will not make any mentions to the manga. And One Piece started publishing in 1997, while Eden Zero comes around more than 20 years later in 2018. And so you need to understand that the business is very different nowadays than it was in the late 90s. Right now you need to make a statement way earlier to make buzz in the community. So maybe early One Piece wouldn't be so successful nowadays, and though it did take some time to build its own world, but again, it doesn't really matter in this conversation. So this is how Eden Zero fails, the One Piece story structure. So one of the very strengths of One Piece comes up very early in the story, even though we wouldn't recognize it until many years later, and that is the One Piece itself. I don't know if it was because I started One Piece very young, but early on you think that the One Piece is just a classical buried treasure. But as the story progresses and you understand, there is something more. And that is a strength because it makes the end goal more interesting than the average battle shonen. You know that Naruto is going to become the Hokage. You know that Deku is becoming number 1, just as you know that Luffy is going to get the One Piece. There's no question about it. But you watch Naruto because you want to know how will Naruto become Hokage, how will Deku become number 1. But in One Piece's case, you not only watch it to see how will Luffy get the One Piece, but also what is the One Piece. And here's how Eden Zero fails that, because almost right away you know more about Mother than we know about One Piece in the last 20 years. Right away we are shown a visual representation of what Mother looks like, and basically the confirmation that is a sentient being, and the purpose of meeting her. That is for her to grant you a wish. So when you watch Eden Zero, it is only to see how will Shiki find Mother. But that's not only where it fails. So, as I said, the One Piece is only a strength some years after the beginning of the show, but a strength that it has very early on is its characters. And I'm not here to talk about crap about Mishima's writing, especially when Oda is one of the very best at writing characters, and I don't mean it in a manga and anime sphere, but in media in general. What I think Mashima fails very early in his story is creating a group of antagonists like the Straw Hats. The Straw Hats end up carrying a little bit of the show and is a big part of why many people watch One Piece. And that's because Oda makes you root for the Straw Hats to win their fights, because you are invested in them as a group and individual. And I think Mashima tried to replicate this, especially with Fairy Tail, but in Eden Zero he fails that, and by a large margin. Nowadays, more than 20 years later, we have 10 Straw Hats that were introduced over the years, being Jimber, the last one, only joined in chapter 998, and with Eden Zero, in 70 chapters, you already have the same amount of members. And that's a problem because we are spammed with characters that we cannot get attached to because they don't have time on screen, and so that feeling that you get with the Straw Hats cannot be replicated. But the biggest strength that One Piece has, and for me at least the very best to do it in media in general, it is world building. And I feel like this is something we can't talk about that much, in the sense that very early on, One Piece world building is a thing out of extraordinary. Since I think Oda is more focused on writing good characters at the time, and you just see hints here and there that you will understand very years later. But again, as I said, Eden Zero debuted with One Piece already at its prime, so it was possible to do that better from the beginning. In One Piece, once you reach a different island, at times it also feels like a new, different world, different scenario, new characters, and Oda at times even presents to you the story and the culture of the island. And in Eden Zero, so far, everything has been very bland. To finish things off, I will just try and stop comparing how Eden Zero fails the One Piece story structure, but how Eden Zero fails a very important battle shonen concept that One Piece does it better than most, and that's the fight scenes. Again, with the same argument that I use in character section, I'm not here to talk about crap about Mashima being inferior to Oda in fight scenes, because the problem is not even that specific. This is a weakness that Mashima's work has had for many years, and I think it's beyond repair at this point. Both in Fairy Tail and Eden Zero, you can see a lot of One Piece's influence, and the major theme that the Straw Hats, the Fairy Tail Guild, and Eden Zero have in their groups is that their friendship will help them conquer their adversities. And One Piece does this in a way that makes the character have an ulterior motive to winning, and so he pushes himself to do so without being cheesy about it. And in a way that is realistic to the viewer, and we as the audience see that the villain lost because of the Straw Hats on merit and not because of plot harm. Eden Zero is the opposite of that. The last big arc we had in the anime is the Draken Joe arc. That makes Draken Joe look like a big threat during the whole duration of the arc, and going into the climax you think that Joe is the very first challenge to the crew. And when you make Joe so powerful that you cannot make Shiki defeated in a credible way, Mashima uses a shortcut in his writing and makes the protagonist win with the power of friendship, taking the easy road and making so that the journey didn't get the payoff we wanted. I can safely say that Shiki's transformation was the worst in terms of build-up I ever saw in shonen as a whole, and it's these basic shonen tropes that had been built for many years that Mashima fails at doing correctly, and the failed opportunity of being the next One Piece that will make Eden Zero not reaching the very top of its potential. So yeah, long story short, Eden Zero is pretty mid.